good morning. We are here today on the Missouri Instructional Leaders Network, a place where we're trying to get people together to collaborate and learn on instructional practices in Missouri. And we're so excited to have Sherrie. I'm not going to attempt your last name. I should have practiced. Sherrie, how do you say your last name?
It's Bonastia.
Bonastia with us from the link. And she is going to be sharing with us today the power of secondary math proficiency scales. And more exciting to me is she's going to share how her company, The Link, who we partner with because they're fans of our product and they are doing amazing work as far as providing great PD and services using those proficiency scales. So I'm so excited to have you, Sherrie, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. And of course, like Shauna just said, we are excited to partner with Step Up. This is something that, as a former teacher, not that far removed from the classroom, when I had the opportunity to first view my initial mat, I was blown away. That was a piece that I thought every single teacher, if they had this resource in their hands, would be so empowered to do bigger and just that maybe +1 within their classroom. We work around standards and we talk around standards so often, but as teachers, and DESE ever changing what the standard versus the Missouri Learning Standard versus now our priority standards, there was always this evolution of change, and ensuring that we were keeping up and testing on those products was always a challenge within the classroom. So this resource is amazing in that it keeps everything organized for us and it works around the content, and we're able to support clarity and the proficiency levels, instructional methods, and support teaching within that standard. So I have a quick and little brief thing about what the link does and how we support the product. And so this is just things that everyone can read as back later, but we believe in supporting teachers through differentiation. And it's beautiful in conjunction with MAT products in that this is built specifically to differentiate within your classroom. It addresses the fact that not all of our learners are the same. And these are approaches we can use with extended learning, or this is an approach that we use with our on-level learners or our emerging learners. And these are the tips and tricks that are out there for you to use as well. So we certainly support teachers in all regards. We're teachers of teachers or instructional coaches. And we are so lucky to be able to bring this to Missouri learners as we're going through and as further ones are being developed. We just had conversation. I was so excited this secondary math one showed up in my mailbox when I saw it. It was a proud moment for me to see that come through. So of course, what is a MAT? And I say MAT regularly with teacher friends, and they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, who? They want to know who is MAT, and I always have to change the verbiage to what is MAT. So it is an assessment and teaching tool. And in this case, and I'm going to tell you that in this case, this is around our secondary math. And what is so beautiful about secondary math is that Shauna and her team realized that there is a vertical progression to mathematics and how the state also sees that. And within this one resource, all of the progressions have been addressed 6 through 12. I don't know if that could be any more powerful as a teacher to know that in 6th grade, this is what we're working on. But as we look, it progresses all the way through geometry, and we're able to look at that progression in a regard that maybe we hadn't realized that how that happened and what happens after they leave us. So that's always such a powerful thing for me to be able to point out. So as we're talking around those priority standards, why are we talking about those, and what do those look like to us, and how is that incorporated within the MAT itself? And so the priority standards are a DESE document, and there's always this evolution. However, what does that look like in mathematics. And I'm scrolling quickly because we're talking about the 6 through 12 within this. However, these priority standards outline within the key components the standards that are most important to be mastered at that level. So in turn, as we're looking at the different relationships as we move forward, again, this is the outline or the vertical progression. Within the mat itself, everything is based around those priority standards. Everything is based around ensuring that what we're looking at is covered and that everyone's able to ensure those pieces are being covered within their content as they're being taught. Another thing that's so important, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second because I want to hold up this gorgeous book. So,
hey, it's working.
I want to hold up. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome back. So, I don't know if anybody's ever seen one of these crazy things. And if you haven't, you should. And I know Shauna and team are happy to show samples of their work all the time. It's one of these humongous, it's this big old thing. But one of the things that I wanted to show is that in the print copy, there are these beautiful pieces that have the anchor charts already built in. And it's also in the digital piece. So these are all things that as an educator, you're not recreating. This is not something that you have to do from scratch. It's not something that doesn't exist. Her team put together almost every possible thing that you could think of along the way and what that would look like. Also, within the mat itself, there's a scaled expectation for the student. So if your student's doing this, then this is what you can do, or examples. And so as we're looking, and this is what I'm going to share that screen once again, as we're looking at scaffolding instruction, that's exactly what the mat speaks to. So in our scaffolding instruction, this is a sixth grade prioritized standard and the expectation that goes along with it. So the scales are actually there. The assessment question types are there, which for real, that's just a beautiful, and I realize I sound like a fangirl in saying for real, but I genuinely, this is such a powerful tool as an educator, especially as secondary begins to move into standards-based grading away from letter grades. This builds proficiency scales for you to be able to do quick checks. If you're doing a formative, yes, they hit these marks. If you're doing a summative, there are actually questions embedded within the content where it is going to do a quick check. There are also linked examples or stems. There are map questions that are within there. And then MoLeap has released items with scoring guides that certainly could help in regard to this is what it looks like. This is how we're tested. This is the language that's used. So many times there are barriers relative to language when we get into map testing. So this also gives direct examples of released items and what that would look like where it's found within the released items section.
And Sherrie, can I jump in really quickly?
You should jump in.
One of the questions with this book, two things I want to point out. So on the right-hand side, you do have those item specifications and things from the state. And those of you on the call, I know there's people across the state who have been on, even though Chip's not there, he was kind of finishing up this last revision of item specifications, and those revisions are in this map book. So we had access to that. So that's usually a question I get, are the revised item specs in here? That's a bonus if people have the digital, because as we get things, you're always going to have the revised one. But I want people to know that those items are also in this hard copy book, so you don't have to worry about buying it and then it being revised. But that being said, we've had the book in stock 2 weeks, and I've used it in a couple weeks, and people have said, oh, I don't know about this item stem. So two things about the item stems. One, sometimes when we were going through, I had content experts like yourself who helped work on vertical progressions and items. Sometimes we felt that there were errors within the item stems, right? So sometimes we found that what item writers at the state has classified as a 3 might have been more of a 4.0. So I want to say that if you ever see any of that discrepancy, I submitted to content writers because I was having the best of the best do that. But also in that we have now since found, even in those released item specs, because we were trying to quickly get them in the group in the book, that sometimes people have had some small errors in them. So I have to say it's not infallible, but the state documents aren't infallible, but we have tried to fix that. So if you ever see a discrepancy, anyway, I wanted to put that disclaimer out there because I know those questions come out a lot.
And it's a working document. That's the beautiful piece or component of the digital copy, is that as those items change or restructured, or if there are things that are found that need to be different than they were originally constructed, that happens, and it happens instantaneously. And it's all around Missouri standards and Missouri priorities. So it's not around what happens in California because that's a big market, or what happens in Texas because that's a big curriculum market. This is specific to Missouri and what is happening here and what our teachers need to be doing. So in saying that, I wanted to look within the scales. So it's a 4-point scale, 4, 3, 2, 1. I specifically wanted to look at this 2 scale. And the reason I wanted to look at and point out today the 2 scale is that we have this continued notion that our students have gaps. We know that COVID existed. However, at this point, instructionally, as educators, we have shifted ourselves into how we need to teach differently to this new student or this new modality of learning, right? As we look at this scale 2 or 2.0, it is very heavy in resources. And this is not isolated to the single priority standard I selected for you to review or to share or look at with me. It is very heavy in resources, specifically because as teachers, we have to do interventions regularly. We get to have conversations with students where there are deficits. However, we don't always know what best practice or the tip or the trick or what it might look like with that one student, and to have to research and find content that is based within a standard that's not on a teacher pay teacher, something that we can just pull up that has fidelity, that has been tested with fidelity, that is actually something that is useful. Here it all is, all of it. And when I say that to you, there are videos, there are sample stems, there are test questions, there are anchor charts, there is language, there are suggestions, find missing values. All of these components within the scale 2.0 are designed to close gaps. Ultimately, we expect our students to be achieving at a higher level. There are activities, I cannot tell you how resource rich this one component within the MAT resource is. There are things everywhere. So and again, I love this resource. I love it because everything exists within it. However, as we look at it, this portion for your students who you're doing interventions with or who might be emerging learners, this is where teachers are going to live within this document. And the digital components within this are exceptional. And they've been tested for the validity within classrooms to ensure that they work and that they are usable and friendly it's really a great portion of the document itself.
So
And then
Sherry, could you maybe speak to it all how, because you're in schools all the time supporting teachers, of how during a collaborative meeting you might use that with a teacher?
so we have clients that use the product. And in saying that, we have clients who use the product. Of course, I use it all, we pull it out all the time. So I will have teachers say, especially if they're going through a success team, students going through a success team, and they're having communication with their admin teams or their instructional coaches within the building or their counselors, we will have conversation regularly. What does it look like on your mat? Have you used your curriculum tool for any of those resources or activities? So a lot of times when you ask teachers when they go into a meeting like that, what are the strengths of the student? They will say they're kind, they are friendly, they are respectful or responsible, right? That's not the language we're looking for when we go into those meetings. We need more concrete things. So what the scales actually do for us are they give us the language. Is your student able to explain what a point on the graph of a proportional relationship is? They are not able to do that. Okay, that's a scale 3. That's where we want 3.0. That's where we want our students to be. So let's look at the 2. Are they able to recognize specific vocabulary? Yes, they do recognize specific. Are they able to apply that vocabulary? So as a teacher, it's changed the language that they're using as well in those meetings and in closing those gaps for students. They also pull those examples. I cannot tell you how many classrooms they will say, I don't know what that means or how that should look. Okay, open your curriculum tool. The anchor chart is right there. Let's create that anchor chart. And it's just the light bulb. They forget digitally that they have these pieces. And as soon as they're reminded, it takes hours of the rabbit hole of Pinterest, the rabbit hole of teacher pay teacher. It takes hours of their time away. They have it at their fingertips. If they don't want to recreate it, they can just project it. That image exists. So if they're using it day after day, that's something that can just be shown in the background. The students love it as well. They're colorful, they're fun, they're self-explanatory, and they're easy to use. This is used regularly. And again, it just helps with language for teachers, especially with struggling students, to be able to have conversations related to a standard where the deficit exists and not how their personality is and they're such good kids.
Well, and I just want to make a point. Part of the power for this call with instructional leaders are you can get this tool and give it to teachers. And I feel like it's pretty intuitive and most people can understand it. But the power in what you just described was even sometimes when we have those great tools, we forget them and we forget how to use them. So it's so important. I have instructional leaders on the call that if you have these tools of having those processes in place of asking those questions, bring it to the student support team. And it's such a helpmate. Sue, I'll have you chime in later in the call. If we're even doing walkthroughs with administrators, I was an administrator sometime, even in 4th and 5th grade math content, where I'm standing there thinking, I don't know. But if I had that tool, I can now easily see, oh my goodness, that example that teacher's doing is really a level 2. And it helps. It's a really great guide to help your administrators even coach your teachers, and they need that. We want to be better, and the pattern we're seeing across the state of Missouri is we're unintentionally teaching that level 2.0 and thinking it's a 3, and so we're not even exposing kids because that clarity to the rigor. But I love how you're showcasing the 2.0 in scaffolding, and we've been finding in rural communities it's extremely powerful because we're getting a lot of non-certified teachers. So the clarity and content knowledge of even your teachers coming in, that tool can be a huge support of watching those videos to teach themselves how to do it.
It also gives a team clarity around proficiency levels. There's always that subjectivity 2, what is a 2 or what is a 3, or my student is a 4. Well, are they really did you expose them to a different level or a different rigor level within the content area? And most of the time, the conversations are very quick and clear when they bring their formatives that we are going to review or we're going to look at. It's a very clear divide at that point. The 2 is where most of our students are. So we need to use the resources within the proficiency scale or within the scale 2.0 to recognize that that's where we are and we need to be at the 3. So all of these tools and components can help to elevate that and increase the level of knowledge for our students and increase the rigor that's happening within the classrooms itself also.
So
yeah, thanks for jumping in. And there's one quick last thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was the assessment alignment. And I feel like we really have talked pretty strongly around assessment alignment. I pulled up the same initial map that we looked at, and as we look at that, we have, and Shauna just spoke to this, there are map release items. This is much of the content around the right hand column is all based on released items or on stems that exist, sample stems. Map session 2, question number 5 in the scoring guide, LEAP task, and the scoring guides that go with that. So this is not, and you can see the sample stems and the map session items that are on this page and the screen that I'm sharing. Again, and I spoke to this earlier, language is a huge barrier in mathematics. That sounds ridiculous. However, we have so many students who may be the most proficient math students, and then they falter on language. So the continued exposure, and this is a conversation we regularly have in classrooms as well, is that continued exposure to different ways or different processes of asking the same questioning techniques. That's so important for our kids to be exposed to, our students to be exposed to, in that it might not say how many more. It might say there are fewer, but it means that we're going to add, or I might say how many more and we're going to subtract. So it helps this specifically in task alignment and assessment alignment helps to ensure that we are having exposure to all those different components. So again, here's this resource that Step Up has created with their creators. And then as the link, we get to go in and support teachers with this content and show them the greatness that already exists and help them realize that we know teaching's hard. And we know that instructionally, there are so many resources. This has everything in one place for a teacher. You don't have to go to 14 different books or 14 different areas. Here it all is in one place. So I'm super excited to show everybody the secondary, the 6 through 12. Like I said, just to have the progression, rural areas, if they were to have a progression of their 6 through 12 in one spot and not have to worry about bringing components of different resources that might align 6 through 8 and then have to worry about 9 through 12, to have this in one spot is really a powerful resource to have in your fingertips.
Thank you so much, Sherrie. And I know I'd like to open it now. Sorry, I'm at home. I'm opening it up to any thoughts from people on the group of how you might be using it. So you could maybe speak to the walkthrough thing.
Sure. As a instructional leader, I just retired as a principal, and I know I could go into almost any classroom and give you feedback on, instructional techniques, grouping, the aesthetic of the room. Maybe you should have done a turn and talk here. But when it came to content, especially, let me just say high school or middle school math, I would have needed a tool, and to have this digitally, to be able to reference the priority standard that a teacher is addressing, and for the teacher and I, the educator and I, to have that commonality, for me to be able to reference the MAT tool is so powerful during feedback from a walkthrough. And it allows me quickly to, I mean, sometimes you just feel as an educator that maybe we're teaching not to the level of rigor we should, but you can't really pinpoint it. You have that mat right in front of you. You can see quickly, is this educator using those critical thinking stems on the right side for the level 3, or have we dropped down? Is our tier 1 instruction really mirroring that level 2, which is just below proficiency? So I don't know. I think it's a great tool that provides the administrator and the teacher with some talking points and gives you the power as the administrator to make some really meaningful connections with your classroom teacher to improve instruction.
Jennifer, I know you're on the call and you've been using these tools. Anything you could add or creative ways that your district is using it? I know your district's also kind of following the competency-based learning, and Sherrie, you talked a lot about the vertical progressions. I think those are important because as we do competency-based and personalized, we need to understand where kids are on the continuum. As classroom teachers, we usually get really familiar with what our kids need to know, but we don't really see below and beyond. But I know, Amber, Jennifer, anything you would like to add or share or use in other ways?
Sure. First, let me apologize because I yelled in everyone's ear to let other people know that we finally figured this out. So I'm sorry about that.
I just muted you, Jennifer. I was like, we're close enough. I'm going to do that.
Anyway, as far as secondary goes, specifically secondary, we still have some exposing to do, I think, so that people know better how to use it. But what I've been talking with teachers at the elementary level about can also apply to secondary. I just haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. We're going old school, and I'm encouraging people to take a piece of paper and fold it and put their kids' names on sticky notes and move them up the progression from a 1 all the way to a 4 so that they can visually see where they are, so no one gets left behind. It's constantly in front of them. And then take the mat for the standard that they're working on and actually print it. We've got the digital, but to print it and put it behind that piece of paper where the kids' names are on sticky notes. And that way they can check in with kids after a little bit of instruction. Let me check with you now. You were at a 2. Let me assess you on some of these items that are in 3 to see if I feel confident that we can move you up. And just being able to see where all of your kids are and know when I can give that common assessment, for our district, that's really powerful. And the teachers, I'm telling you that it's mostly second year teachers that I've been able to share this with. They are all over it. Last year, we hadn't even purchased it yet, and Shauna gave out some samples. And so I picked some samples for some reading standards that they were working on at the very end of the year. These are first year teachers. They went wild over the mats for that very purpose. Like, these are ready to go. We can see exactly what the expectations are at each of these levels. Now, we don't use a 1, 2, 3, 4. We use a not met, approaching met, but it's the same thing. I mean, they saw the transfer and they were so enthused, and they're like, we have to have this, so they're seeing the power with just very little exposure and asking for more. This year, after I got to work with our second year teachers at the elementary level, the focus is on math. So we were talking about math, and I got invited to go to one of the elementaries and talk to some teams and folks that were in that second year meeting, for math teachers. They were very, very excited. They're like, are you going to share what you shared with us yesterday? Because they were so excited about what they were going to be able to do and accomplish with their kids. So it's a really powerful tool.
Well, but let's applaud you for, I love old school. It's now because I am old, but the visual of really, and I think that's where the power of personalized learning, you're helping teachers see, where are my kids on that continuum. And I think the only reason they get so excited is because it's the clarity that we all wish we would have had as teachers. because
Mhm.
they're kind of jumping in the dark. And so, but I love how it is your leadership. I'm glad that it was intuitive, but putting those practices of the Post-its and showing them how to do that is very powerful, and they take off with it quickly. So thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
this approach. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, Sherrie, I really appreciate you taking the time, and just thank you for the great work that you're doing across the state using it as well, because that's the power in it, is we're trying to improve educator life for teachers and students. And I very much appreciate your expertise, because Sherrie had a big hand in those. I think you wrote all the vertical progressions in that 6 through 12. I saw polynomial and I said, I'm out. Sherrie, please help. But thank you so much for doing great work with teachers and sharing with us today.
Well, and of course, thanks for having me, and thanks for letting us share your resource. It's pretty fabulous. Everyone should use it.
Thank you.